Hey guys, welcome to Five Star Man Champions Livestream. I'm your host, Neil Kennedy. I'm glad that you're here, glad you're with us tonight. If you're new and this is your first time to be with us at Five Star Man, welcome. This is what we do every Monday night. We do a live teaching, and we have groups all over North America and actually South America, Central America that join us, and men who start groups and basically have joined the efforts to resurrect authentic manhood. So welcome. Thank you for being a part. Make sure that you guys get a copy of the QR code, which is basically the link to FivestarManBook.com/sign up. And that will give you established steps on becoming a five-star man. We'll deliver you a copy of the Five-Star Man book. We'll deliver you the 45-day challenge. We'll deliver you the daily champion. Basically, everything that we offer will be delivered to you absolutely free. We only operate by partnerships, and for you that are partners and are champions of Five Star Man, thank you. We have we have a lot of efforts to resurrect authentic manhood, and I'm glad that you're a part. And we have new churches signing up. I was just in the assembly in Warner Robins, Georgia. Just last Wednesday and Thursday, had 150 men stand up and declare that we're going to be authentic men. We're going to resurrect authentic manhood. And we're closing out the year, getting ready for next year. It's going to be incredible. This weekend, two things are happening, very specifically. A lot of things are happening, but this weekend, Mark Jones is going to be at Journey Church in Hollidaysburg, the Altoona, Pennsylvania area. He's going to be doing Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday. And then I'm going to be here in the Tulsa area at Owasso First Assembly of God, where we're going to have the Breakfast of Champions. I'm going to be leading that and excited about that. So other groups are having activities. We're just so thankful for each and every one of you. I want to get into the teaching tonight. We're talking about freedom, and what we've been doing is we've been talking about the difference between free dominion versus domination. And there's a spirit of domination that really man has been wrestling with from the very beginning. But what we're seeing is it's kind of coming out of a stealth mode. This whole notion of domination is really front and center. Almost every argument that is being given today on social media platforms, on news media, everything is really about, are we going to be free people? Are we going to have sovereign individual rights? Or are we going to have to surrender ourselves to the collective mind and be subjected to domination? It's always been the attempt of Satan to have domination over mankind. So now we're seeing it front and center. And why this is so important, why we need a biblical understanding, is why we're tackling this subject. So this isn't for the faint of heart. I realize that. I've been wrestling in prayer this morning at 3 a.m., all day long as I was preparing for this. I've been wrestling in prayer. Had a conversation with a pastor today that a man in the church is trying to invoke witchcraft over him and the staff, and this is real stuff. This is stuff that we deal with. This is stuff that a lot of people just kind of brush off, but this is the reality. This is what we're dealing with. We're wrestling not with flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers of the air. So let's get into this. Let's talk about freedom. And I think it's going to come from a little different angle tonight. And I think that you're going to want to really dive into the field guide. I hope that you have your copy of the field guide. Now, what I do is I give this to you, and I teach directly from this. So as you're seeing that I'm trying to stay right on the notes, I speak directly from it. So let's go to Judges chapter 19, verse 20. Judges chapter 19, verse 20. Let me tell you what's happening, because I really got to get the whole idea here. But let's read verse 20. Judges chapter 19, verse 20. "You are welcome at my house," the old man said. "Let me supply whatever you need. Only don't spend the night in the square." So he took him into his house, and he fed the donkeys. After they had washed their feet, they had something to eat and drink while they were enjoying themselves. This is really interesting dynamic what happens right here. While they're enjoying themselves, some of the wicked men of the city surrounded the house, pounding on the door. They shouted to the old man who owned the house, "Bring out the man who came to your house so that we can have sex with him." Now these wicked, perverted men are crying out, "We want you to surrender the man that is in your house so that we can have sex with him." Now that obviously not consensual. That is rape. It is domination, sexual domination. And so as we get into this, I want to bring this out and talk about the spirit of the age that we're currently living in. Let me set the scene for you. Now, there's a Levi man who takes a concubine. Now, I won't go too far into this teaching, but a concubine is really what you would consider a second-class wife. This is not a paramour, which would be an illicit lover, a forbidden lover. This is not just a mistress. A concubine was similar to having a wife. However, she didn't have the full legal rights of a wife. Now, you can obviously see that there's a lot of issues there, but in this day and time, this was a legal relationship, and this Levi has this concubine, and she's from Bethlehem, and she gets angry, and she leaves him and goes back to her father's home. Now, this is there's a lot of mistakes going on in this story, but here's one of them. She's no longer under the leadership of her father. She is under the leadership or the headship of her husband, who is the Levi, who has servant leadership over her. Now, the protocol of authority places leadership under authority so that we can manage, we can take care of, so that we can properly take care of. That means to protect, it means to promote, it means to provide, and it also means to empower the person that you are over. So God places you under leadership so that you can manage what He's placed you over. That is the proper role of a husband and wife. Guys, let me just say this. This is bonus material tonight. You are not in a position of leadership to have domination over another person, including your wife or your children. You are to have dominion in that you are to rule and lead, and that is to be a good steward, and that is to take care of, properly manage, cultivate that you're leading. That's why God gave man dominion over the earth, but He did not give man domination over other men. So you need to understand, she is under the protocol of authority of her husband. Stepping outside of that authority, she's exposed to be harassed by the enemy. She's open territory for the enemy to be able to harass her, and she would become helpless. Remember when Jesus looked down in Jerusalem, and He concerned Himself with the people of Israel, and He said to them, "They are like sheep without a shepherd." In other words, they are following God, but they don't have leadership to follow Him. They don't have a protocol of authority. Therefore, they were harassed and they were helpless. Even though they were God's people, they did not have proper godly leadership. They no longer had the proper protocol of leadership. So when this woman steps out from underneath the husband's authority and she's running back to her father, she's trying to regain the leadership of her father, but he no longer has spiritual authority. Guys, I remember this distinctly when I handed my daughters over to be married. I knew and I felt the transfer of authority to their husbands. I no longer had authority over my daughters. I don't today. I don't have authority to speak over my daughter's body any longer. For example, when she's ill physically, if one of my daughters has a physical sickness, it is the authority of her husband to speak over her. No longer my authority. No longer my authority. As long as they were under my authority, under my roof, under my leadership, I had authority to speak to their body, just as I had authority to speak over my wife. Even today, I have authority to speak over my wife today because I have authority. So if my wife is sick, and you need to understand this, if your wife is sick physically, you don't take me wrong on this, but you don't have to pray about certain things. You have authority to speak directly over your wife for health and healing to come into her body. Now, that is through the power of Jesus Christ and the healing work that he has accomplished. I need to, if you need more of understanding on that, go to our series on husbandry, and that will help you understand that. So the father-in-law no longer has authority. She's there for 4 months, and the Levi goes to retrieve her. And when he does, the father-in-law does something unwise. The father-in-law begins to manipulate the son-in-law. The father-in-law begins to manipulate him with drinking and eating and relaxing, and he keeps putting off and delaying their departure until finally the Levi decides, I'm not waiting any longer. I'm leaving. And hastily he leaves, and yet because he left so late in the day, he's traveling late into the evening, and they come to the town of Gibeah, and when they get there, it's nighttime. Now, in that day, obviously there's not motels and hotels for them to go to, so they have to rely upon the hospitality of that city, the culture. Now, in the culture of that day, it was what I call the law of hospitality. The law of hospitality normally governs a visitor in the town. A notable person of the town would see a stranger and invite them into their home, and he would take responsibility over the stranger, taking care of their animals, giving them food, giving them something to drink, washing their feet, giving them a comfortable bed, taking care of them. Now, let me talk about this hospitality just for a moment, because it's very important. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 2 says, don't forget to show hospitality to strangers, because many have entertained angels without even knowing it. Hospitality releases your potential. The lack of hospitality dries you up and causes you to be barren. So let me explain this. When Abraham had lost his potential in his flesh to produce a son, even though he had the promise to have a son, he lost his potential as a man to produce a son. And so therefore, when three visitors are walking by. They're strangers. He doesn't know who they are, but he stops them and says, I want you to stop, and I want to show you some hospitality. When he does that, the visitors speak a prophecy and says, this time next year, Abraham, you are going to have your son. Now think about that. Abram had had this promise for years, a direct prophecy from God. I am going to make you an exalted father over all nations. And he's speaking of a promise of the seed of Abraham would become the Messiah, and that all of the nations of the earth would be blessed through the seed, capital S, of Abram. Yet, Abram did not have the physical potential. He no longer had potency to produce a son. Now he entertains three visitors, and what do? This time next year, you're going to have your son, the son of the promise. What was the difference? Abram simply showed hospitality, and they released his potential. Another example is a well-to-do woman in Shunem, and she began to show hospitality to a prophet named Elisha. And when she showed hospitality to Elisha did what prophets do. He gave her the prophet's reward. What would that be? That would be prophecy. So Elisha prophesied over the woman. That's the prophet's reward. A prophecy comes true that she would have her child, a child who would inherit all of the wealth that she had, because her and her husband had not been able to produce a child, because her husband had lost potency to produce a child. And yet, once again, entertaining a stranger, in this case Elisha the prophet, released potential. Now, what I want you to get is how important this is. Mark chapter 6 shows us the opposite at work. When Jesus came to his hometown, they did not receive him. They didn't receive him as a prophet. They did not receive him as the Messiah. They did not receive him as a gift from God. Therefore, they did not receive the gift that he was. Now, make note of this. Write this down. You only have the benefit of the gift that you are willing to receive. You only have the benefit of the gift that you're willing to receive. You need to remember this, because you never know the connection that you possibly could be making just through the common exchange of a visitor. I know of a minister who simply said hello to a man in a restaurant. The man in the restaurant had it in his heart to give a significant financial gift to a particular ministry. He was traveling through a city in Virginia on his way back from a ministry where the minister would not receive him. And because he wouldn't receive him, he still had the check for $8 million in his pocket. So he stops at a restaurant to grab some lunch, and another well-known minister walks by, simply greets the man, not knowing who he was, simply says hello, and the businessman invited the minister to sit down. The minister took the time to sit down and meet the man, and the man said, I sense that what God wanted me to do for another man, because he didn't receive me, is now meant for you. And he pulls out that check for $8 million and hands it to the minister and says, put this into your ministry to win the lost. All because he greeted a stranger with hospitality. So that divine connection was there. Now watch what happens. The old man invites a Levi, this Levi who stops in Gibeon, going back to our story in Judges. This old man who is in the town invites this Levi into his home. Now you're about to see a disaster. He invites him in his home, but he shows him hospitality. He washes his feet. He feeds his donkeys. He gives the man and his concubine food and wine. And they are having a good time of fellowship. And then all of a sudden, everything shifts. At that point, the Bible says, while they were enjoying themselves, a crowd, one version says, of troublemakers of the town surrounded the house. Now, this word for troublemakers is this word that this one version, troublemakers, is kind of gets this impression that they were somehow just juvenile troublemakers, but that's not the case. They weren't just casual troublemakers. The word is Belial. Belial. In fact, it means, some versions call it the sons of Belial. And you'll see that in Scripture, a referral to the sons of Belial. You know what that means? The sons of destruction. It means that these were sons of evil. They were literally evil begotten. Think about that. These were not sons of God. These were sons of the devil. These are perverted, ungodly seed of Satan. They're just evil men. I know that that's harsh, but that's exactly what Belial means. It means these are the wickedest men on earth. And look what they do. They surround the house. They start banging on the door. They start shouting. They start rioting. And they start shouting, "Bring out the man, the stranger who is with you, so that we can have sex with him." This is a horrible, horrible wickedness and a sin. This is the sin of domination. This is the spirit of our times. The spirit of domination. Guys, think about all that's going on in our society right now. You look at our culture right now, and our culture is no different than what's happening in Judges chapter 19. These people have given themselves over to absolute wickedness. Sons of destruction. Sons of Belial. All of the riots that we saw. You saw the news headlines where there are buildings on fire behind the reporter, and he's saying it's mostly a peaceful demonstration. You saw the destruction of cars, and you saw the destruction of homes, and you saw the violence as at people like walking down the streets. We saw a senator and his wife being threatened in the streets of Washington, D.C., and it was during these riots, and these were sons of Belial. These are sons and daughters of destruction, where they circle an innocent like hyenas or African wild dogs on the grounds of Africa. On the wildernesses of Africa, you see how they are animalistic. People giving themselves over to wickedness. This is the times. This is the signs of our times. This is what we're facing. Guys, listen to me. Galatians chapter 5 verse 13 says, "For you have been called to live in freedom, but don't use your freedom to satisfy your sinful nature. Instead, use your freedom to serve one another in love." The freedom that we talk about on this series is free dominion, the ability to use the resources of this earth to bring satisfaction in our life, the ability to fulfill our purposes in life. Freedom requires responsibility. Now, what I want you to see is this old man said, I want you to come into my house, and I'm going to take responsibility for you. Freedom is taking responsibility. Now notice this. Freedom is not the absence of laws. Freedom is not unemployment or living, and it's not living unproductively. Freedom is not living without purpose. Freedom is the liberty to fulfill your purpose and satisfy and reach your destiny. Guys, we're in a strange time where the free dominion of humanity is in direct conflict with the spirit of domination. We talked about the spirit of domination as witchcraft last week. Tonight, I want you to understand freedom requires responsibility. It requires us responsibility to look for the care of others. Now, this tragic story, there's so many mistakes in this. Number one, the mistake of this woman leaving her husband out of anger. And we've known wives who have done that. They get upset. They don't get their way. They run back to their parents, and they abandon their position under the authority of their husband. We see the mistake of this man going and not being wise in his decision making and not bringing his wife home earlier and exposing his family to this city. The rest of the story of this, where these perverted men are so bloodthirsty. And we don't understand this. This is just an unbelievable thing where he literally put his concubine out on the doorsteps. And somehow to satisfy the cravings of these wicked people, this woman is brutalized. This crime, and I don't have time to dissect the rest of the story, and I didn't mean to use that term, but it's a fitting term at this. I don't have time to explain every part of this story, but this crime is what finally led Israel to repenting to God and establishing freedom back into their culture. I want to end with this note. I'm praying that everything that we're seeing going on will shake us to a point of repentance as men and go back to God to embrace our freedom as men, courageous and strong and free dominion. Hope you got something out of this tonight. I look forward to seeing you next time. Goodbye.